this is Sergio and welcome to our video discussion. This is lesson 1 of the general education course on the contemporary world, the introduction on the study of globalization. All throughout the semester, we will be talking about the world, the contemporary world. And when we talk about the world, the buzzword has still been globalization. Now, I understand that when you hear the word globalization, dugay na kayo mga nakadungog ani. If I would ask you, when was the last time or when was the first time that you've heard of globalization? What age were you by then? Unsa mga grade level ato? Unsa pa man ang panahon ato nga? Unsa pa man tong panahon na when you heard of globalization? And you might say, dugay na kay na ang globalization. And sige na siya o balik-balik. But later on our discussion, you will better understand that globalization is not only for companies, globalization is not only for governments, not only for people who have been to other places, but even if you are just here in the Philippines, even if you are just here in Cebu City, in your locality, you are still affected with globalization. And to better understand what globalization is, let us understand its meaning coming from a person who has extensively done research on what globalization is. On the name of Manfred Steger, the director of the Globalism Research Center at RITM University. This is his definition of globalization: the expansion and intensification of social relations and consciousness across world time and across world space. Manfred Steger has done a lot of research about globalization. He even has a book on globalization. That is why his words on what globalization is has been widely respected in this field of study. To better understand it, let us dissect atong tagud-taguron ang iyang definition of what globalization is. And of the first thing that we need to the first things that we need to understand about globalization is the first part of it, which is the expansion. When we talk of expansion in globalization, it pertains to the creation of social networks, that you need to connect with other people in the world. You don't have to be limited to your locality only. You don't have to be limited to the Philippines only. We can already connect to other people in the world. So we need to create social networks in different parts of the world. Once you already have that network, you need to multiply that existing connections. And the importance of that is the sharing of information, resources, and everything that we need to talk about with regards globalization. We can better learn from people across the globe and how they do things from where they are. Maybe makatunta gikan nila, or maybe makakontribute towards para nila kung what we do here and atong i-share sa ilaha, they may learn from it, or what they have there, we can also benefit from it. So we need to expand our connections, not only limit ourselves to our locality and the Philippines. The next thing that we need to understand is on his next statement, intensification. When we talk about intensification, it pertains to the intensification of expansion, stretching, acceleration. So, because if we only limit ourselves to expansion, then we can have connections all throughout the world. But the next question is, how deep is that expansion? How deep is that connection? What do we do with other people that we are connected to across the world? Do we have projects with them? Do we have progress in our connection with them? Do we have concrete output with what we are doing with that intercontinental, international connection with other companies and people across the world. So it has to be a productive relationship as well. The next part of his definition talks about social relations and consciousness, which means that when we talk about globalization, it should not end with who we are connected with. It should not end with what we do with other people that we are connected with. What do we do with that relationship? What output can we have with that relationship? It should also involve with how we think about things that we do every day and how it is related in a globalized world. So even in the absence of connection, even in the absence of that international connection, we can still be globalized in the way we think. So how do we think? How is our consciousness? Unsa man imong mga how do you think about things? Sa imong mga gipangbuhat adlaw-adlaw, do you only think of it as something can only affect where you are, can only affect you, can only affect us, or do you only think that what is happening with us right now is only because of what is happening on our place, on our locality? Are we not affected by what is happening across the world as well? And the truth is, yes, we are affected with that. So that is why we don't only think of globalization about what we do about globalization, but we also think about globalization with regards how we think of our daily lives in relation to what globalization is. That is why Manfred Steger would also say that the process of globalization do not occur merely at an objective material level, but they also involve the subjective plane of human consciousness. Meaning, it is not on what we see only, it is not on papers only, but globalization should happen firstly on how we think, on our minds, on humanity. That being human is not limited to being Cebuano. Being human is not limited to being a Filipino or Asian, but being human is being part of a world. Being human is being part of other cultures, other nations, and that we need to interact with each other. So not only subjective, but also on the conscious part of being human. That is why on the last part of his definition, we would see that he talks about being globalization, being across world time and across world space. This means that globalization is not only about today. Globalization is also about what happened before. Kung sa may nahitabo sa una, that could have affected what we are doing right now. What are we doing right now? So that we can better understand what can happen next. What do we want to happen in the future? So that we would know what we should do today. That's time. And in space, we can no longer give mga pasangil nga we can only do it here in Cebu, we can only do it here in the Philippines because we're limited in connections, in terms of geography, in terms of space, but we can already connect with other nations through various means. The world is no longer separate islands. The world is interconnected because of technology. That is why globalization right now has been sped up, mas paspas siya, mas ngilngig siya, because we are now boundless. Wala na yung boundary. Diba? So, we can already talk to people. Bisag asa pa na siyang dapita because of technology. We can connect with them, work with them. We can even create outputs with them, do business with them, communicate with them, socialize with them through technology. So we can already work with other people across the globe. globalization is across time, and is also across space in the world. And in fact, in the world right now, you would better understand na ang space is not only limited in the world. We are already going outside of the world, exploring the moon, exploring Mars, exploring other planets for source of life. We are going outside the world. That may be the next phase. Dili na siya globalization siguro. Somehow universalization. But as of the moment, we are trying to understand what globalization is. Now, if globalization then affects what has been happening in our life, wherever you are, you're affected with globalization, the next question to ask is, on what things do we need to be globalized with? What are the aspects of our lives that we have to think about nga dili ra ni siya diri sa atoa? It's also connected, or it's also affected by, or can affect other parts of the world, other people across the world. Is it not that our politics, our government should also see what other governments are doing? Is it not that our what is happening with other governments in the world is also affecting our government in the Philippines? Are we not benefiting from other governments in the world, and that they are helping the Philippines to progress, to develop? In our economics, is it not that we are buying things nga ang ato ang gipamalit? In fact, most of them are not coming from the Philippines. Most of them are produced in other parts of the world. And that we are also selling things to other parts of the world. We are doing business with our crops, with our mga fruits, vegetables, the minerals that we have in the Philippines. In fact, the people, the OFWs who go outside of the nation, magtrabaho dito, and then they bring back money diri sa Philippines. So we are interconnected in that part. Then why do we need to interact with other cultures? Why do we need to know unsa ang ilahang culture dito? Nga diri ra man kahata. Maybe if we understand their culture, we learn some habits, we learn some discipline, we learn from their culture some things that may improve how we live and how we manage our lives. Because culture is ever changing. It doesn't mean kung ingana na ato ang kinaiya as a Filipino, forever ingana na gid siya. We can always learn from other culture. Pwede ta na siya mausab. And that is the importance of globalization on the aspects of culture. Why do we need to learn other languages? Why do we need to communicate with other people across the globe? Why do we need to share information with other people? Why do we need to understand what's happening in there, to be informed with what's happening in other parts of the world? Then maybe knowing these things can also help us in our means of living in the Philippines, in our means of living in our locality. Basin di ay ang ato ang questions on how to improve, how to survive, for example, the pandemic can be answered with information that we can get from other countries, from other cultures. So we need to communicate with other people across the world. And communication has been intensified because of technology. Because of technology, we have done a lot of things at the tip of your finger. Makakontak na mo mga tao, not only talk to them, but you can see with them, interact with them. At the tip of your finger, you can already buy things from other parts of the world, and then i-deliver sa inyo ha. And pas-pas na kaayo ang communication. So, we understand all these things because we talk to other nations who are already way ahead of us in terms of technology. So, and we better know how to handle things in health, in education, in technological production, in economics, because of our understanding of technology from across the world. And we also understand that each of these countries are interconnected. That what happens in one country can affect another country. Dili ra kaingon kay magtakod-takod, but the economies of these countries are interconnected with each other. If mahagba ang Pilipinas, then people might go to other countries, which will affect other countries. If mo improve po ang Pilipinas, mamalik po ang mga Filipino sa Pilipinas. And then it may improve or it may affect the manpower that we have outside of the Philippines. So these countries, all of our countries, are interconnected. The social exchange, that because of technology, our socialization is not only limited to our neighborhood. Our socialization now expands all throughout the world. We can already interact with different cultures because of technology. The world, as being said, is becoming smaller and smaller. Kaya dali na lang kayo ta maka-interact with other people. Dali na lang kayo ta makakita kung what is happening with other parts of the world. And it's no longer like before. We need to travel to see what's happening there and understand what's happening there, learn from what's happening in other places. Pero karon, it's already at the tip of our finger. So social exchange, socialization is sped up in today's technology towards globalization. And in globalization, we better understand that we need to help each other. That we can also help, for example, within the Philippines, if na ay magbagyo, we help each other. One region helps another region. And for the Philippines as well, if magkalisod ang Pilipinas, we are also being helped by other countries na ipadala nga tabang sa atua. And even if nagkalisod ang Pilipinas, we also help other countries. If na bagyo sa other countries, we also try to help. We give what we can give. Our government would provide aid for other countries as well. So, all these things, politics, economics, culture, communication, technology, connectivity, social exchange, and social relations, are the things that are happening in our everyday lives that should be globalized, is affected by globalization, and should be in line with a globalized way of thinking. And if every day we think of these factors as part of a world, then we will achieve globalism. So, not to confuse, globalism and globalization are two different things. When you say globalization, it is the process. When you say globalism, it is the belief. So, everything should start with globalism. We should believe first. We should understand first the importance of globalization. And then we do something about it. And that will now be the process of globalization. With this, let me ask you these questions. How have you experienced globalization? What steps are you making to become a globalized citizen? More so, a globalized professional? And how globalized is your way of thinking? That has been everything that we would need to talk about on the introduction on the study of globalization. This has been Sir Joe. I may not be able to see you next week, but you will surely see me on the next video discussion. Thank you and goodbye.